All right, somebody talk me through how to factor 1 and 2.
The original factor is 5, and the lowest x, so it'll be 25 by 5.
Okay, so 5x is the GCF that we're taking out.
Plus
5x plus 7. Okay.
negative 63 up to x thing, 2, and it'll you get negative 7, the x minus 7 x.
Okay, so we're multiplying to negative 63, and we're adding to 2, and our numbers are 9 and negative 7, or negative 7 and 9, it doesn't matter. X plus 9, x minus 7, okay. And at this point, I shouldn't see any earbuds, I shouldn't see any cell phones. Should all be gone. Okay. The next ones are problems you should be graphing. So we're getting Desmos out. So for the first one, I've got 1/2 x minus 3 to the third. So to type into the third, I'm doing shift 6 to get that up arrow to the third power, shift 6. Or the other way you could get the third power is you could do the keyboard down here, and you can do this button right here, raise it to the exponent spot, and then type in a 3. Plus 5. All right, and then from here, if I want to see points on the graph, how do I get to see points on the graph? So I'm going here, in the table, okay. So I'm looking for what point do I always look for when I graph something? The vertex or the locator point in this case. And then what is the vertex or locator point? 3, 5. So I'm looking for 3, 5 on the table. So 3, 5 is going to be right in the middle. Now 3, 5 is not on our table, so we got to make our table a little bit bigger. Okay, there's 3, 5. And then I'm going to do a couple points on either side of that. So a couple points here and here. So I can do, can't quite do 5, 9. It's a little bit off the graph. But there's 5, 9. I graphed it up here. We've got 4 and 5.5. 4, 5.5 is right there. We've got 2, 4.5 right here. And then we've got 1, 1. Okay. Then we got to graph the next one. And if you watched the videos like you were supposed to, you heard me say over and over and over again how to type this. How do we type this in Desmos? Got to put a space at the end. How do you get the third root? If you watch the video, I said it over and over and over again. Use the keyboard. You can do that. CBRT. If you do CBRT, Desmos will graph it for you. CBRT. It'll put it in. CBRT. Or you can do functions. I think it's all the way at the bottom. Down here. That's one way to do it. Or CBRT. Okay, x minus 6. Yep, and then get out of the radical and then a plus 4. Okay. We need to get some points. Okay, so what is the locator point on this one? What's the locator point on this one? 6, 4. So I'm going to look for 6, 4 in the table. How do I find 6, 4 in the table? Right after the 2. Press enter. Okay, so there's 5, 6. There's 6, 4. So we got 3 points we can graph there before we get some more decimals. So I got a point up here I can graph, -2, 8. I can graph -2, 8. And then I have 5, 6. 5, 6, 6, 4, and 7, 2. So -2, 8, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2. So those are the points that I graphed. Okay. Then the next one, what are the transformations? This should be old news, right? What are the transformations? Is it a compression or a stretch based on the number? So it's a fraction, which makes you think a compression, but it's actually not, because the fraction is 3/2. And if you type in 3/2, that's 1.5, that's bigger than 1. So it's actually a stretch because of the type of fraction that it is. So this is a vertical stretch of 3/2. It's a fraction, but it's a fraction that's bigger than 1. What else? Left 5, down 2. Okay, what's the locator point? -5, -2. Okay. What are the x-intercepts? So we're going to have to graph it. Okay, let me go back and delete this. So we got 3/2. How do I get a square root on the screen? SQRT. Or you can use the keyboard and use this button right here. So SQRT would do it. X plus 5, get out of that. Get our -2. So here's our locator point right there, -5, -2. What are the x-intercepts? How many x-intercepts are there? 1. There's 1 x-intercept and 1 y-intercept, but they're not asking for the y-intercept, so we shouldn't write it down. They just want the x-intercept, so there's just 1. So -3.2220. That's the only answer we write. Okay. Now this graph starts at the locator point, and then it goes up forever, kind of like this. And yeah, so for the domain, we're going to use the x-coordinate, right? That's what the domain uses. So we're going to do the x-coordinate of the locator point, which is -5. And then here it goes forever to the right. And what number is that? Infinity. And so what should we write for our answer? Bracket -5, infinity, parenthesis. So the domain is from -5 to infinity. So this is one of those times where our domain is not negative infinity to positive. It's -5 to infinity. All right.
How you asking?
Yeah. All right, go ahead and turn your warm-ups in. I'm going to have you guys turn them in today. The second one, yeah. Second plus 7, 1, 2. Did I put notes back there for you? All right. So we're going to evaluate functions, which means you plug numbers into the different functions, and we have some different functions, and I've used different letters, and that way you can kind of tell what they are, similar to how you guys are students who have different names. So this function is called f, this function is called g, this function is called h, this function is called k. So when we do each problem, you'll be able to know which function we're using based on which letter is in the problem. So they have different names, and then we're going to plug a number into them, or when we get down to the problems that are a little bit more complicated, then we'll be plugging in variables or plugging in expressions. And once we plug the number in, then we'll see what that function equals. We'll evaluate that function. So for example 1, it says to take function f and to plug in -4. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to write down function f. So function f, I'm going to say f of x, function f is 3x minus 8. And then I'm going to take my marker or my colored pencil or whatever, and I'm going to write on top of the x, because that tells me where I'm plugging in the number. So wherever I put an x, that is where I put the number. Okay? Now, what I like to do, what makes my life easier, is I put parentheses around the x, because it's easier for me when I plug the number in with parentheses around it. So when I type this in on my calculator, or when I plug this in, I'm going to say f of, and the number I'm plugging in is -4. F of -4. And you can write this part with the color if you want, or you can write it in pencil. It doesn't matter. So f of -4 equals 3 times -4 minus 8. 3 times -4 minus 8. So all I did is I took the x out, and I put the number in that I was supposed to be plugging in. Now, this part right here is notation. This is just telling me what I'm supposed to do for the problem. It's not the final answer. So I don't really need this part anymore. I'm just going to cover it up because I don't really need it. And then the other part of the problem, this is what I actually need to type into my calculator to see what my answer is. And I'm going to type it exactly the way that it looks. So I'm going to do 3 parenthesis -4 parenthesis minus 8. So 3 parenthesis -4 parenthesis minus 8. And everybody should be typing that in. What do we get? -20. Perfect. -20. So my answer is -20. Did we all get that answer? Okay. The next one says g. We're going to use function g. So I'm going to say g of x is -x squared plus 9x. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to write down where I'm plugging in the number. And I can put parentheses around the x so I know where I'm plugging it in. And then I go back and I take out the parentheses and the x and I put the number instead. So g of negative 2 is the negative version of negative 2 squared plus 9 times negative 2. So all I did is I took the x's out and I stuck the negative 2's in there. And now I'm going to take my calculator and I'm going to type that in. So I have the negative version, parenthesis, negative 2 parenthesis squared, plus 9 parenthesis negative 2. Everyone get negative 22? Yeah? Okay. Okay, next one is k of x. This one is 4 square root x. Okay, we're going to take our x's and replace them with 49. So here, technically, you don't really need parentheses around the 49 when you plug it in the calculator. Every other problem we've done so far needed the parentheses. This one doesn't. But your calculator can handle those parentheses just fine. It's not going to give you the wrong answer with the parentheses there. So I'm going to still do it with the parentheses anyway. Perfect. Yeah, who did we have going next? I think Eddie might have been next. You're good? Okay. Yeah. And I think... And then Daniel, you can go next. Okay. So we've got 28. Okay, let's see if we can do this next one. So, m of x is cube root x minus 9. I'm going to let you guys figure out how we should be plugging the number in. Does anyone remember how to get a cube root on your calculator screen? A cube root on your calculator screen? You hit the math button. It's underneath the green button. You hit the math button, and can you see what option number it is? I think it's 4. Is it 4? Yep, it's option number 4. Mm-hmm. Anyone want to share what they got? We got to hit the math button when we type this in. Shouldn't be a decimal. We should get out of this. Did you get out of this and then type -9? So it should look like this, right? No. Shouldn't be a decimal. Does your line go all the way across? It shouldn't, because if you look on your paper, yeah, see how your line doesn't go all the way across here? The 9 is not being subtracted underneath this cube root. You got to use your right arrow to get out from underneath the cube root. Answer should be -5. Okay. All right, then they start to get a little bit more complicated. What makes these ones more complicated? Yeah, it's two problems at the same time. So we have to figure out what h is when you plug 8 in, what n is when you plug -3 in, and then we got to add them together. So let's write down, we're going to have h of x is 3x minus 2. And I'm going to ignore the notation. And what do I get? $22, okay. This is 22. And then I have n of x is x to the third plus x. Okay. So -3 to the third plus -3. What does that give me? What does this give me? -30. Anyone else get -30? Negative 3 to the third plus negative 3. Anyone else get negative 30? Yeah? Okay. And then we have to take these two answers, we have to add them together. So 22 plus negative 30, what does that give you? Negative 8. Okay. So same thing for this one. We're going to take P of x, plug in negative 5. Take Q of x, plug in 11. Add them together. Take a moment, do that one, see if you guys can all get the same answer. Let's see if we can get it. So we're going to take P of x. See where our x's are. So when we type it in for P, we have P of x, negative x squared plus x. So when we type it in the calculator, we have the negative version of negative 5 squared plus negative 5. And when you type that in, you should get negative 30. So the parentheses. So be careful about the parentheses. Those are important. Q is a lot easier. It's just parentheses plus 1, so 11 plus 1 is 12. And then negative 30 plus 12 is negative 18. Yeah, it was negative, negative. But you don't do negative, negative as positive though. You don't do that. You got to actually type it in.
I'll put negative and another negative and then a 5. And then instead of the plus, I made that a minus because it was negative 5.
That's okay. That would have never ruined the problem.
And I got 32. Oh, no, I didn't get 20.
Yeah, if you got 20, it would have been because this was positive. Yeah, if you didn't have parentheses around this when you squared it, around that negative, that would have messed up the problem for you. Yeah. All right, let's try number 7. So number 7, same thing. We're going to get two numbers, and then we're going to multiply them together. So let's see if we can get this one right. So take F, plug in 4, take G, plug in 1, and then multiply them together. Let's see if we can get this one right. Mm-hmm. $32. Did we get 32? So for f, when we plug f in, we get 3 times 4 minus 8. 3 times 4 minus 8 is 4. Did we get that? For g, we get negative, the negative version of 1 squared, plus 9 times 1. When we plug that in, we get 8. 4 times 8, yep, because they said to multiply in the beginning. 4 times 8 is 32. All right, the next one, same idea, except at the end we're going to divide them. At the end we're going to divide them, okay? Now, when you guys get to the end, go ahead and write your final answer as a fraction instead of as a decimal, okay? So don't plug it in your calculator and see what the decimal is. Let's just write it as a fraction at the end. Do you guys have a positive or a negative fraction? So if you have one of each, is it positive or negative overall? Mm-hmm. So the fraction overall would be negative. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is the top of the fraction bigger than the bottom, or is the top of the fraction smaller than the bottom? Smaller, okay. Is the top of the fraction an even number or an odd number? Odd, okay. All right, we done? We got it? Should have got, negative 5/8? We got negative 5/8? Okay, so we should have had, let's see, for h of x, if you plug in negative 1, you get 3 times negative 1 minus 2 h of x, 3x minus 2. So we got minus 5. The other numbers? So we're just looking up here. whenever we write the name of the function we're working with, we get everything else from up here. And then k of x was 4 square root x, and I got that from up here. And tells us to plug in 4. So I got 4 square root 4. When I plug that in, I got 8. And then it said to divide the numbers. So negative 5 on the top, 8 on the bottom, and I just wrote it as negative 5 over 8. Okay, now the rest of the problems are not just plugging in numbers. Now they're doing stuff with letters as well. So now we're going to try those and see what happens. So the next problem says m. So if we look at the top of the page and write down m says cube root x minus 9. So let's write down m. Cube root x minus 9. Okay. And then I'm going to write down where I'm going to plug my stuff in. It's going to go right here. Okay. And the stuff that I'm going to plug in is 27b to the third. Yeah, this is where it starts to get complicated. Now, this part is just notation, so I don't really need this part, so I'm going to kind of ignore it. Now, let's see, can we do the third root of 27? So how do I get the third root up on my calculator screen? Hit the math button, go down to 4. Can I do the third root of 27? What do I get? I get 3. Okay, so you can do the third root of 27. You get 3. All right. Can you do the third root of b to the third? Third root, I'm going to show my work over here. Third root of b to the third power. What happens when you do a third root of b to the third power? They would cancel out. Third root of b to the third power, they cancel out, and what are you left with? Just b. Okay? So over here, third root of b to the third power, you're left with just b. The 9 drops down, and this is what we're left with. 3b minus 9. Okay, let's try the next one. It says f of a minus 6. So I'm going to write f of x down. F of x, when I look at the top of the page, f of x is 3x minus 8. Okay. Going to look at what I'm plugging in for x. And then I'm plugging in this whole thing for x. So I'm going to say f of a minus 6 is 3 times a minus 6 minus 8. So I took the x out and I replaced it with all of that stuff. And I'm going to ignore this. This is just the special notation. And if we have a set of parentheses with a 3 in front of it, what do we do with the 3? We distribute the 3. And what does that give us? 3a minus 18. We still have a minus 8. And what is a minus 18 and a minus 8? Not quite, because they're both negatives. Negative 20 6. Okay. The next one says g of x, which is the negative version of x squared plus 9 times x. And we're plugging in for x right there, and x right there, and x right there. And we're plugging in a 4c. So I'm going to ignore this because this is just notation. I have the negative version of, and if this says squared, how many of them should I write? 2. I have 4c and 4c. And what's 9 times 4c? 36. 9 times 4 is 36. 36c. Okay. In the front, I have the negative version of 4 times 4. C times c. C squared. Mm-hmm. There we go. Okay, I think I'm going to leave that last one for now because I want you guys to be able to practice some of these before you leave. So, the assignment we're going to work on looks very, very similar to what we just did. So, it's going to have a bank of problems at the top. You'll notice that the letters are very similar. So, we still have an f of x, a g of x, and h of x, but they're different than they were on the notes. So f of x is not 3x minus 8. F of x is now 2x plus 5. So the functions are different than they used to be. And then it's going to ask you to plug in numbers into the functions. So I think for today, I think what we're going to do is the front side of the page only. We're going to do 1 through 10. Does that sound doable? 1 through 10, front side of the page only. Can we do that? All right.